Hello, everyone. My name is John Kruth. I'm the Executive Director of the Rhine Research Center, and I want to welcome you. We have a really fun and amazing event. We have some great people with us today who are going to be talking about their experiences with mediumship. Lynne Jackson, I met her a number of years ago at the Forever Family Foundation meeting in Durham. She has really done a great deal with the field of mediumship since that time. She's published two books, The Light Between Us, which was a New York Times bestseller, and Signs, which has come out more recently. She's appeared on numerous shows across the country, and if you don't recognize Lynne, you really will very soon. Thanks for being here, Lynne.
Thank you so much for having me here.
And we'll have Janet Mayer, who is also with the Forever Family Foundation. Janet is a really unique type of medium. She has a unique talent that I'm not even going to try to describe for you because it's just so fascinating. It's a great honor to have you with us again today, Janet. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
And Joanne Gerber. Joanne, I hadn't met her before, but as I looked and learned more about her, I found that she has been involved with research since 2007. She had done research with Gary Schwartz and Julie Beischel at the University of Arizona. She is also with Forever Family Foundation. All of these, everyone who's with us today is very involved with Forever Family Foundation and the Windbridge Research Institute. They are two really great organizations that help us to learn more about after-death communication. I want to thank all of you for joining us today, and I'm going to turn it over to you to go ahead and tell us why you're here today.
Thank you for that great introduction, John. I'll speak for all three of us, I think, when I'm saying we are thrilled to be here together. And I'm so excited to be in discussion with Janet and Joanne. It's far and few times that we get to come together energetically like this. It's usually through either an event for Forever Family Foundation, which all three of us are part of, and we are also all certified and research mediums with Windbridge. I met Joanne and Janet through Forever Family Foundation and then Windbridge. And so it's a great honor to be in discussion. John, you did such a great introduction for me. I don't think I really need too much to add too much, but Joanne, Janet, is there anything you'd like to add?
Well, one thing is I am not part of Windbridge. I did work with Julie Beischel and Gary together at the Human Energy Systems Lab when they first started all that. But I just wanted to clarify that.
Brought in, right? You were the original with Julie.
Well, I was the original with Gary and Julie, so yeah. Or in the second round, I should say. Second round.
I include you in
one
that,
more round
Janet.
before.
You were there before any of us.
I have been here a long time. But yeah, I mean, I'm really excited to be here. It's the same thing. I've met I met Joanne, I think at one of the grief retreats in Connecticut. And that was like, I think the very first time I met her, and it was with Forever Family Foundation. And that was really cool and it's like, we always did this thing where when we were doing readings, we didn't want to be in the room when anybody else was in there. So we didn't want to read the crowd after they were reading the crowd. So I had to wait. And when I was finished, I was lucky to see Joanne. And I was just like, oh, wow, she's really cool. I really like the way she works. So then I think not too long, I got to see you, Lynne, when Fran had introduced me from Forever Family Foundation. She's like, you're gonna really like this. I know you're gonna get along with her really well. And when I met you the first time, I think was at one of the conferences, and the same way I saw you, and it's like my mouth dropped open, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, because you guys both read so well and you do great in crowds. And I'm a little more shy when it comes to the crowds. I don't really like standing up in front of people, but I love watching both of you work and just doing so much healing. So it's great to be a part of you guys, both of you guys.
Thank you, Janet. Thank you so much. And Laura, thank you. I'm so happy to be here today with both of you and everybody that's here today. And I feel really grateful and honored to be a part of two organizations that bridge the gap between spirituality and science. And some people say, well, why did you ever decide to get certified as a medium? And I think that the major utmost test as far as ability has been being certified through Windbridge and then the Forever Family Foundation. And it's not just about about the evidence that we produce. That's a huge part of becoming certified, being clear on the details and connecting with loved ones that are passed on. However, we also had to learn things like about grief. We had a grief study program. We had an interview for more of like a psychological interview to make sure that we're well balanced and able to do this work. And mediumship, we have all kinds of people entering into the world of mediums. So it's important because every person we work with, literally, we are what we bring through for them can be life changing, and we want to be the best we can be. And I think that becoming certified has produced standards in our industry, which we don't have, because nobody really recognizes a professional psychic medium as a profession like other professions. But it is becoming more mainstream, and I'm very grateful for that. And I'm grateful for my colleagues, for Janet and for Laura and everybody else that is connected with the Windbridge and Forever Family Foundation, because the truth is that we are here to help you. We are here to help people. It's not just, a show, an entertainment show. We're actually here to help to heal. And that's the kind of audiences that the Forever Family and Windbridge with their events brings forth, is that we are healers. We're here to do the best we can to validate the existence of the spirit side of life, where our loved ones continue to survive the survival of consciousness. So I'm grateful to be here today with all of you, and thank you so much for inviting me today.
That was so beautifully said, Joanne. Thank you for speaking,
Thank you.
what I feel in my heart as well. That was so eloquent. Thank you. Janet, you didn't mention you have a book, Spirits They Are Present, which I have read, and it's phenomenal. And in that book, you talk a lot about your abilities and how you came to terms with them, which is something I want to discuss with both of you too. But Joanne, we need a book from you.
It's coming next year.
I feel this. I'm really excited. I can't wait.
2022.
When is the publication date? Do you have it yet?
Probably by the spring of next year, most likely. Maybe a little bit later. I keep adding to it. I keep changing things.
That happens.
Life happens.
I feel like the books keep writing themselves as you're going through the process. That's so wonderful. I'm
It's
so
very
excited
exciting.
about that.
Yes.
One of the things I wanted to discuss with you guys too is when you first realized you were different, or that what you were perceiving was outside the norms of what maybe you were told was possible. For me growing up, it was a little bit isolating, and I came into my abilities not in an elegant way. First I started thinking, oh, everybody sees people in colors and everybody feels what other people are feeling. But, at age 11, I knew my grandfather was going to cross before he crossed. And I was extraordinarily close with him. And I write all about this in The Light Between Us, so I won't go into so much detail here. But suffice to say, I felt very different. And I think as a child, and certainly as a teenager, you just want to fit in, right? And it took me, decades, honestly, to understand my abilities, but more importantly, to understand the purpose of them, and that they are a gift, and they're a gift we all have, right? And we're meant to honor them and share them with others and use them as a tool for healing. But I will say I never knew any other psychic mediums. I did not have, a soul sister group. I didn't have any sense of community with that until Forever Family Foundation and until meeting you and other extraordinary mediums. So it's been such a blessing to come together with a common goal of healing and goodness and light and all of that. And I just want to thank you for, being part of that community with me. It's allowed me to really access things in a much more profound way, being part of a kind of community of light workers.
It's good.
What was the experience for you guys coming into your abilities? Was it easy? Did you have a moment of questioning it? And what I'd like to talk about too is like, how do you get things and the difference between psychic abilities and mediumship? Anybody want to jump in?
Sure, I'd be happy to. When I was about 12 years old, I saw my grandmother sitting at the end of my bed. It was just less than a year prior to my bat mitzvah, but I'd already started the process of going through at the temple and studying and rehearsing for my bat mitzvah. And my grandmother had just passed away, and I was very close with her. My Nana, she lived with us, and I saw her. I was laying in bed, and I was very emotional, thinking that, oh, I wish she was here to see me get bat mitzvah. She'd be very proud. When I was thinking that, I saw her appear at the end of my bed, and I felt my bed actually move. And I saw like a figure, like a shadow figure of my grandmother very quickly, and then it just dissipated. So that was the first time I had a connection with a loved one that was passed on that I can recall. Before that, I had seen little lights floating around the room at night. I was always a sleepwalker, a sleep talker. So my sleep state might have been working with the spirit side of life when I was younger, and I didn't recognize it. And then when I turned 15, a very dear friend of mine lost her mom to cancer, to breast cancer. And I was really, really saddened by this because she was actually a neighbor too. So we all knew her very well. And her daughter was one of my good friends. We hung out all the time. And I felt very bad for her because this was the first time I ever had one of my friends lose somebody, a parent, close to them. So I was feeling her pain. And so one night, and I just went in my bedroom, and I kneeled down on my bed, and I crossed my hands in prayer position. I said, please, God, please don't let my mother get cancer. I don't want her to get cancer, because I saw what this woman went through and her family went through. And I was young, and I was trying to process all this. And then I heard a voice in my head say, your mother has cancer. And I got scared because it wasn't a voice that I recognized. It was like a male voice. And I thought, oh my God, am I imagining this? I can't tell anybody. They're going to think I'm crazy. I'm 15 years old. What do I know about things? And it wasn't until actually about 6 years later, my mom was suddenly diagnosed with cancer. She bit into a piece of fruit, and then she felt something in her jaw and her neck, and then she felt a lump and went to the doctor, and they did a biopsy, and it came back as malignant non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. So, I always wondered, did I have something to do with this? Did I create this? Why did I hear this? Should I have told somebody? Would they believe me? I had many, many questions. But I never really told anybody until I started getting into what I'm doing, because then I understood the relationship with that experience from my younger years, that I was actually becoming a medium or becoming psychic, or I want to say opening my gifts, because we all have them. And I was becoming more aware of that. And then I had fast forward to when I was in my mid 30s, I went to go see a psychic in good old Salem, Massachusetts. Everybody probably knows Salem, right? And I had a dog, and I was told that my dog was dying, and my dog was 6.5 years old. So I went to see a psychic to find out if she could help me understand, the process of my dog dying and what I should do. I went to the Angel Memorial Hospital, where my dog was in intensive care for about a week. And I got a call saying that, oh, you can come pick her up today. She's doing much better. Meanwhile, the visit before, which is just a few days prior, I was given brochures on pet cemeteries and cremation of animals and how to go about doing that. So I was very confused. And I went to go see a psychic, and they didn't really, she didn't really tune into it and give me an answer whether I should put her down or just let her go, and so I was still very confused about it. And I even asked the hospital, are you sure you have the right number? Because you just told me my dog was dying 2 days ago. How can this happen? So they didn't really give me an answer. And when I went to the hospital and I spoke to the vet, they let my dog out of the crate, and she came out with a little IV in her paw, and she was jumping and running and wagging her tail. She was a small little fox terrier, and her name was Corky. And so she pulled me down the hall. She couldn't wait to get to the car and go home. Long story short, she lived till she was 12 and a half years old. And when I asked the vets, what happened? How did she go from almost dying? Because she was literally lethargic when I brought her in. She couldn't walk. She wasn't eating. We really felt she was going. And then something happened, and it was a miracle. Literally, it was a miracle. And I'd asked the vet, do you think, there's something with divine intervention or a miracle happening here where you can't explain it in a more scientific or medical way? And the vet just turned around and didn't want to look at me and said, who knows? So that was my answer about that. And she was really my miracle that set me on this path, because I had an angel come to me in a meditation when I started taking classes after the psychic said, oh, you should take my meditation classes, come there once a week and sit in a circle and we do visualizations and meditations. It will help de-stress you from what you're going through with your dog. So I said, sure. I was always interested in the paranormal and parapsychology anyways, and had taken some courses while I was in college. And so I said, why not? I'll do that. So I read the Dummies or the Idiot's Guide to Meditation, like cover to cover, like the night before the class. So I would know, I would go in and know what I'm doing with everybody else, all the other students. And I had this fascinating meditation where an angel came to me, and an angel came and there was this beautiful red silk heart pillow with white lace around it. And I remember it as I saw it coming tumbling towards me with the angel behind, in a very angelic, light voice. The angel said, Corky's going to be okay. Corky's going to be okay. So I was taught, well, if you're experiencing some sort of connection, whether it's with loved ones or angels, don't just receive the energy, but actually communicate with the energy, which I didn't know you could do. So I said, what is your name? And she gave me her name. And she told me it was Crescentia. And I had never heard that name. That's not a common name, as far as I know. So I was so excited when I went home and I asked my partner, I said, I told him about my experience, and he said, well, here. And he gave me this book called The Lives of the Saints, which is, he's Catholic. So growing up Jewish, I never learned about the saints. So I started to get into everything spiritual after that, wanting to dig into everything. And I opened up the book, and there was a page, and it said Crescentia was the nurse for Saint Modestus. And Saint Modestus there was a picture in the book with a saint with a dog on a leash that looked just like my dog. And the indoctrination date was the date of my mother's birthday, who had passed. So I had all these connections happening all at once. And I said, there's no way I could have made this up, because here it is being validated. The name Crescentia, where would I get that name from? Never heard of it. It was in The Lives of the Saints, a book I had never heard of either. So that kind of led me on my path to want to explore more and learn more. So those were some of my first experiences, which will be in my book next year. But it made me believe. And then I wanted to get validation. That's where I looked like, is there an organization that can validate that what I'm doing is for real? Because if I'm going to change from being a business owner of a retail wholesale store that I had to doing this work full time, as my teacher wanted me to come work for her in Salem as a reader right before Halloween, fun. And I wanted validation. I want to know, I want to be validated with this, that I can do a career change, because I really felt I could help people. If I have this gift, let me work on it, let me develop it, let me help other people, because it certainly helped me and showed me a lot of light around my life and my path. And I want to do that for others. So I ended up becoming a reader in Salem, and then eventually going out on my own. But I don't want to take up too much time, because I know Janet and Laura have more to say too. But that's basically a synopsis of how I started. And it's all about the validation. If a medium doesn't get validation for themselves, how can they validate things for other people? So I wanted to prove that what I was doing was something real. And the best way to do that was to approach a scientific organization, which, there's not a lot of them. There's several in the United States and outside the United States, but I really wanted to find out if what I was doing was real. Is it possible to talk to dead people and angels and guides? And is this all real? And I did find my answers. And yes, it is real. And you don't have to be, somebody special. They call it a gift, but you know what? We're all born with gifts. I know I can't play Mozart on the piano, and I certainly can't paint a Monet, but there are people that can do that. And there are people that can connect with loved ones too, that are not taking classes or don't know they have the ability. So I'm so happy, even when people, in their middle ages come and say, I think I have this ability, Joanne. I want to take a class. I want to learn how to open it up and help other people. And I absolutely love that, because we're all teachers and we've all learned ourselves, and we all want to share that. And we want to share the healing and the closure we get from making connections, that we're not more special than anybody else. It's just that we were focused on opening this up, learning about it, and developing it. And basically that's the nuts and bolts of the gift. You have to want to open it up, trust it, have patience, and work on developing it so that you can give your best to those who come to you for help. So I really feel grateful on this path, and again, grateful to be here with two other wonderful mediums and colleagues and friends, and so that kind of is a synopsis of how I started and where I am today. That was 21 years ago, and here I am today.
That was a great job explaining it. So, what I find interesting is, for me, it started with such a fearful knowledge that somebody I loved so profoundly was going to die. What's interesting with you too, it's almost like sometimes I feel like the other side gets our attention by giving us certain information that we're absolutely forced to pay attention to. So how you spoke about having that voice telling you your mother would have cancer, that was maybe frightening or jarring information, but you did such a beautiful job explaining how that got your attention and kept your mind open to what does this mean, and then leading to your dog, which has a very happy connection there and ending in terms of angelic presence in our lives and so forth. That's fascinating. Janet, I know you speak a lot in your book, Spirits They Are Present, about your experience, but for those who haven't read it, and you have some very unique abilities too. So would you like to share anything about your journey coming into understanding of your abilities and so forth?
Sure. Well, and I'd like to say too, is what I didn't realize is that all three of us have something similar that happened to us. And one of the things was with my grandmother. You had grandparents, and it was interesting because I guess, start in the beginning where, excuse me, I first saw my dad when I was young, and he was standing in the doorway and I could see through him. So that was my kind of very first experience of, oh my gosh, there's a ghost of my dad. I can see through him. And it kind of led me on the path of fear, I guess, because I realized I could see ghosts, and I didn't know ghosts really exist. And, that's what I called him. I realize now, he's still alive, that it was astral projection, but, as a little 5-year-old, you don't realize that. But one of the big things is when my grandmother, we went to see her at Christmas, and I remember standing there looking at her, and it was like she was communicating to me and saying, "I'll never see you again." And I'm like, I'm never going to see my grandmother again. And my grandmother passed that night on Christmas Day. And, so I didn't realize we all had something kind of similar in a way. And it did lead me down that path of, for me, it was kind of a path, like I said, of fear, because I didn't have anybody to ask to say, what's going on? Why am I seeing? Did I kill my grandmother? Same like, Joanne, did I do this? Did somehow I make this happen? How come I couldn't stop it? And so that was a really tough one for me. But, it's like, and I admit, when I was a teen, I did kind of have fun using psychic abilities and knowing things, and, okay, so maybe I did a little bit of that, but, it was just a fun thing. And as I got older, I realized that there were a lot of things happening, and I was still picking up on people that were dying, and that was a tough one for me. And I didn't know how to control it. They always say, oh, there's a switch, you turn it on, you turn it off. And I'm like, where's the switch? Where's the switch? So I had a really difficult time with that. And And so I was always trying to look for something. I was trying to read, I was trying to find someone, and I would kind of hide at the same time. Like I didn't want people to know what I knew, because a lot of it, I didn't like what I knew. And so, I started meditating, and meditating really was a really good thing for me personally. Is I would literally meditate all the time, and I would write down everything. At the beginning, I was so scattered that I couldn't hold a thought when I was meditating. And so what I did is I kept a pad of paper next to me. And as soon as I started meditating, things would come like, grocery list, go to the store, pick up the carpool kits. I would write it all down, and it would just like release everything out of my mind. And so that was really, really helpful, but it didn't answer my questions. And that's when I came across the holotropic breath work. My sister had told me about it, and she went with me. My sister Debbie and I went to the holotropic breath work, and it's basically a technique where you do a breathing and there's music, and it's supposed to take you in to figure out what you need to know, about yourself. It goes into the subconscious. And so I thought, oh, this is kind of cool. And I went to one, and it was really interesting. I knew something was happening, but I didn't know, what was going on. And you were supposed to kind of lay on this mat and do this breathing exercise and allow it to come through. And I was quiet the whole time, and people around me, are crying and laughing and screaming. And I'm just like, I was in a cocoon. It was the coolest thing. And I'm just like, I have to go back. So the following month, my sister and I went back. And in that afternoon, it was my turn. I laid down on this blanket, and I started, started with the music and the breathing. And all of a sudden I heard somebody talking to me in my ear, and telling me, get up and go to the bathroom. And I just did it. I just sat up, and I'm like, I got to go into the bathroom. And, of course, my sister's probably, acting like, what are you, 5? You had, you couldn't go before you, laid down. And I'm kind of like, I'm just, and you're not supposed to talk. So I walk across the hall, and I'm washing my hands like, who's talking to me? Who's talking to me? And I come back into the room, and I lay down, and I just start spontaneously speaking a language. And, and it just kind of started coming through. It's like, and it just went on and on for like an hour. And, and I even had told my sister at the beginning, I'm like, don't look at me, whatever I'm doing, don't look at me. Well, when it was over, I have like 6 people looking over at me, trying to figure out, what are you doing? And so that kind of led me on a whole new path of discovering what these languages were, because I could tell there was someone coming through me, and it only came through the top part. And, most people, you would send back then it was a cassette tape. I admit I'm a little older, and, I would send a cassette tape out, and, people were really nice, and they'd be like, no, we don't know this language, try this. And I spent many years doing that. And it eventually led me to a man at the Smithsonian Institute, Ipu Piara, or Dr. Bernardo Pozzotto, and he helped me translate the languages. So that has been a really cool, like, added feature. But I also still had this other thing going on with my mediumship, or, what I wasn't even sure what it was called. I just knew that I had people coming in around me. I could see people sometimes. I would hear people, and I could never put it together. And someone had directed me also to Gary Schwartz. And Gary Schwartz, I started working with him and doing this thing where I would email him every day with information I had gotten because of someone that came through that he had connected with. And so that kind of led me on the whole path, which eventually led me to Forever Family Foundation and to Laura and Joanne. But it was a really cool thing, because it taught me a lot about myself and how the way I work. And when I get something psychically, it's just spontaneous kind of. It's like I know something, I know, all of a sudden I'll think of a friend that I haven't heard from in a year, and she calls me 2 hours later, and I'm just like sitting there like, wow, this is so awesome. I love when this happens. And so the psychic part, I think, probably helps from the fact of being open and allowing the universe, allowing that energy to come through to me. Every morning I kind of wake up and I'm like, well, what do I need to know today? And so I think it's like opening that door and allowing the other, the universe to say, hey, this is what's going to happen today. Or I'll be like, oh no, I woke up and I heard 2 steps forward, 1 step back, or 2 steps forward, 1 step back. And that was my whole day. And I just thought, oh man, I wish I wouldn't have woke up to that, or I wake up to, I can see clearly, that song by Jimmy Cliff, I can see clearly now. And I woke up and I'm like, oh, I like that. That's a good day. And I get in the car that morning and that's the first song playing. And I'm like, okay, I'm in tune today. And I think it's just when you allow yourself to be open and you allow yourself to, connect and say, if I need to know something, let it come to me in whatever way it needs to, whether it's through a song, someone calling, something that, you see or read. If it just clicks with you, to me, that's a good connection. But now with my mediumship, that is totally about seeing people. And I have another really weird thing. Should I explain it really quick? Or, do you guys?
Yes.
Okay. It's, when I do readings, I ask people to send me an envelope. That's, how the payment comes in. And it's usually, it can be, I don't care how it comes in with a check, bank check, whatever, money order, whatever. And I know it's very old fashioned, but I want that envelope. And I even wrote it down. I'm like, this is kind of my thing is I have a file folder. I have an envelope and I sit down, I meditate with my envelope and I write down everything that comes to me immediately after I pick it up. I come home, I do a 10-minute meditation. I write down everything on the envelope. I throw it in a file and it goes into my planner until that day or that week. And then the week before I meditate. And this is something I think anybody can do is meditate, write down whatever you get. When I meditate, I just start and I just see who's going to come through. And I always start off, which is really crazy, is I draw a chair. And I don't know if anybody knows I do this, but it can be a wingback chair, a wooden chair, it could be anything. And it's whatever chair, I start drawing it. It's like putting me already in tune. And then I write the name of that person on the chair. And then I see who comes in. And when they're even, it's in their generation, it's, a spouse, sister, brother, cousins, anything like that. Behind it is parents. Behind that are grandparents. If they come in front, it's children. And usually whenever I get children, as soon as it starts, they start low and then they immediately come in next to them. And so I know that, that's like the way I personally work. And I do it it's like a ritual for me. It's very, the same thing every time. And it's always the way I put myself into it with a meditation, with writing the information. And I'll do that like 3 days. You only get one chair, but you'll do 3 days of meditation. And then after that, the day of the reading, I read everything I receive to the person. And if anything else comes through. And so it's a really good way for me is by meditating and you can meditate however you want. There's ways you can, find it out of a book. You can create your own, which is sort of the way I personally do it is I just have my own way that I meditate. And so I think that, you find your niche and then you go from there. So that's kind of all of it in a nutshell.
Yeah. One thing you left out is what was the language when you went to the Smithsonian Institute and the doctors were able to finally tell you, the doctorates there, what you were speaking. I think the audience would love to hear that.
Yeah, I'm
so interesting. And it's so pertinent given that this was what, 2-3 decades? When did that experience first start happening? Was it 20
in
years
the
ago?
90s? In the 90s.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
So once the audience, the participants hear what that was specifically about, I think it makes so much more sense. I always think of this as like they were giving us a warning. We weren't paying attention. So why don't you share what that language was and what the meaning of it was?
Yes, they were basically the languages coming through were South American indigenous languages, and they were Yanomami, Chicano, Funio, and Kanamari. And like the Kanamari, the last language was only a language they were speaking when shamans would speak to each other, which that's whoever I guess was, speaking through me. And it was really interesting because, I think I took Spanish, like for a year in high school and I was not really great at it. So when these languages started coming through, it was like, this is awesome. These languages are, and it's really cool because they had a message and their first message was, we need to be more earth honoring people. And that was something that I didn't know how to convey to other people because, who am I? I'm just a normal person. And so they were really giving me something that is important for our earth, that we do need to be more earth honoring. And they have given me other other messages too, but that was pretty much the main, the mainstream of it. And it's been really helpful for me,
Yeah. I always think of that when I think of, how we've been ushered into this terrible time of climate issues and global warming and all of that. And I'm like, Janet had the message 20 years ago. They were trying to get our attention, and I think they still are through you. So that's really fascinating. I love how you kind of segued into how you get your information too, because I want to discuss that with both of you as well. And I want to talk a little bit about the difference between psychic information versus mediumship. But I also wanted to say, what you said, something you said really resonated with me, Jenna. You said like when you had that knowing that you were going to see your grandmother for the last time, you had this moment of like, was I part of that? You know, why did I know that? And for me, that was the thing that acutely made me pay attention to my abilities as I was, 11 years old. And I feel like it's interesting too. I think a lot of times right around like age 11 through 13, when those hormones start going, it's like the second opportunity, the surge of abilities comes. And I think either we stay open to it or we super shut it down then, right? Because I think all children are very psychic, but once we start formal schooling, we kind of lock into that frontal monkey mind lobe, right? But then here come the hormones. It gives you the second chance to really engage in your abilities. So how old were you when that happened with knowing your grandmother was going to cross?
I'm trying to think if I was between like 9, 11, somewhere in there.
Yeah,
maybe
it's like that
13.
age. I feel
It was
like
just around that age. Yeah.
opens up so much.
Yeah.
And I was so fortunate. I have the most beautiful, loving mother. I always joke and say I must have saved like villages of children in a past life and sacrificed my life to get this mother I have this lifetime. She's phenomenal. But she helped me embrace it because I confessed to her. I felt so complicit with, death or the force that took him or like it felt like a curse. And she's like, no, part of you is dark or cursed. This is just an extra ability you have. And you should explore it. And then she confessed that, it ran on her side of the family for generations. So then I felt like, well, at least I'm part of this club that I don't know if I want to be part of, but, and the greater part for me is I feel like now I'm part of this club with you guys, and it's in such a beautiful way and the fear is removed and, we're using it to heal others. And it's just such a beautiful thing. So I wanted to talk a little bit about how we get our information because it's distinct and different. And one thing I hear both of you saying that is pretty much a deal breaker for me is that you physically see spirit in your materialistic energy space. That I have told my guys, they do that to me, I'm out. When I'm here in the here and now, I do not want that distraction. I never watch scary movies. I'm scared of every negative energy, right? I don't want, that would be too much for me. So I get everything on an inner screen. And I would like to, we'll talk about our different abilities, but I'm just like, every medium I've ever met is like, well, I know as a medium because I saw this person or that person at the foot of my bed or on the window, or like whatever it is. And I'm like, that's how did you get through that? So how would you guys characterize the differences between psychic information and mediumship, right? Like, I know we always say all mediums are psychic, but not all psychics are mediums. I always feel like being psychic is you're always open to reading the energy stream all around you, the unseen energy, right? And that's something I can never shut off. I don't know about the two of you, but I don't mind it. It's a very helpful tool and it's not very exhausting to do. Mediumship, on the other hand, I keep that slammed like a vault door shut because that is exhausting to me. And what's more, they know they're not allowed up here at the foot of my bed. They have to come on an inner screen in my mind. But I always talk about like psychic abilities being like clairvoyance, the ability to have pictures, images, symbols come into your mind. And some people describe it as seeing it in front of a person. Some readers talk about that. Clairaudience is like, Joanne, you were talking a lot about like hearing voices, right? Hearing a thought that's not yours, hearing somebody's voice, and it's not external, it's internal. And then there's claircognizance, which you're both talking about, which is like this download of just knowing, just can't explain how you know it, but you know it. And then of course, clairsentience, which to me is, reading energy. And I always feel like it takes place in that solar plexus area. And it's, it's when we become empaths, when we feel what other people are feeling. It's when we feel somebody's energy when you meet them. And then I always think like all those abilities are utilized in some like revving up a car, warming us up to hit what I call like that mediumship, which is really just a receiving of information. And I think what I'd love to hear from both of you, even though I kind of know the answer, is how it's different to get psychic information versus mediumship. Because one of the things I love about mediumship is meeting people on the other side. And it's so funny. I'll talk to some people sometimes and they'll talk about somebody who's on the other side. And I was like, oh, I know him. Oh yeah, I didn't meet him till after he died, but I know him. He's so funny. He's so great. Like personalities come through so much, right? So do either one of you want to jump in about maybe anything that I left out or you might want to add on to the difference between psychic versus mediumship and then how you receive your information?
Sure, I'd be happy to. I think you brought up a lot of great points, Laura, with that too, because when you talk about, well, I wouldn't want to work with spirit if I could see spirits around me all the time. It would, bother me if they were just hanging around me all the time. And I've actually requested people to walk through my office door so I can tune into them. And I think that's how it all started.
Oh,
I do still experience spirit in a more subjective way, like you do, as opposed to objective, which is outside of my mind, actually seeing the spirit. And sometimes, when I first started to do this, when I first started to do demonstrations, I would use the same technique as I would for private readings, where, like Janet does, I would write things down before I would go out to do the demonstration in front of an audience of people. So I would sit down with a piece of paper and I would ask, okay, spirit, I put out my intention, which I think is really, really important. Intention to work for the best and highest. And I always say that a prayer and invocation on the phone with a client or in front of a client or before I demonstrate, I put myself into that energy and I open up my chakras and I'm ready to work. It's like kind of punching a time clock. So when I'm not on the clock, I don't want all these spirits to come to me, because when I first started to open up, I was in Stop and Shop and ready to tell the woman I'm ready to jump out of my skin, like, your mother's right there. I know, and I have to connect you. And I'm like, this is not ethical. And I'm
right,
I can't just do this to people in a supermarket, and so
you don't
I
get your
learned,
shopping done either.
yeah, no. You don't get much shopping done when you talk to the spirits all day long in the stores. But I definitely wanted to create boundaries. And someone said, I remember one of my teachers saying, you can create boundaries better with spirit than you can with the earth people. And I find that to be true. Yeah. And so I do have boundaries with spirit. So they know when I'm working and they know when I'm not working. And I would actually, when I first started out, would have to visualize punching a time clock. Okay, I'm on the clock. And when I was done with my readings for the day, I punched out and I closed down my chakras. And that way spirit knows, don't bother her. And plus, really, when a spirit just randomly comes to you, they're really using a lot of energy and you're using energy to connect with them. And what if the sitter, the person that they're trying to connect with, you don't know them, and then just maybe the client that's coming in 3 days. I've had things happen days before an event too, and I just kind of download it in my mind and remember what I experienced. But I find that working more, I guess you would call it more precognitively, before we connect with the person, whether it be psychically or if somebody wants a mediumistic reading, I kind of like to get that jump start, and write things down and meditate 10 minutes before I get on the phone with a client. I'm ready to go with the energy. And so that's my standard of working. It has changed over the years. And I'd say over the past maybe 5 to 10 years, I've been working pretty much the same. I'm pretty comfortable with the way I say to spirit, okay, I'm ready to connect. Time to go to work. Time to download the information. Okay, spirit, I'm open. Come and talk to me. And then when I'm with the client on the phone, I also receive more information as well, as I make that connection from what I experienced prior to calling my client, let's say for a phone reading. So I think everybody works in the way that they find most comfortable, and that can change over the years. If I look at 20 years ago, how I used to work, I've changed some things about my invocation and prayer, or I used to sit and meditate a half hour, 45 minutes before each client. So I'd have to leave this big gap in between clients. And now it's basically 10 to 15 minutes. I sit in the quiet and I take my pen and paper and start to write things down. And this is where I get some of the most craziest pieces of information. It could be like, what can I use as an example? Well, I did a demonstration, one of my first demonstrations with the Forever Family Foundation, and Bob was there. I think Angelina, one of our other colleagues with the Forever Family, she was there too, I think. And I was so nervous, and I kept getting an image of The Price is Right. And I was doing a reading for this woman, and I said to you, okay, I thought they were just going to give me the hook and take me off stage. And I said, can you understand your mom talking about The Price is Right? And she said, yes. Matter of fact, just after she passed, I was a contestant on The Price is Right. And, I was like, come on, you're making this up it's like anything that anyone said when I gave a piece of information that specific that they would understand. I'd always think I'm making this up and they're making it up too, because how can are they just being nice? Am I really talking to people that are passed on? And still to this day, I still question things like, how did they know to tell me that? And, or, where did that come from? And, there's still questions. And I love those validating pieces because it really does prove that we are not doing this on a psychic level, connecting with loved ones. The psychic is one energy and the mediumistic is another energy. And when we get information like that can be validated, whether it's during the session, I've had emails afterwards where people validate things. It helps to prove to the medium that you're not crazy and you're not imagining things. You may think it's your imagination at first when you're developing, but then you learn to just trust it and just give it out. And that's really the process of mediumship. We can't filter everything. And we use our abilities. Some of us have stronger senses. Maybe I feel I'm very clairaudient. That was my first skill set, faculties that opened.
Is that true when you're reading now? Do you get most clairaudiently? Do you hear a lot of the information?
I hear a lot and I see a lot, but I see it more like you do. In my mind, I close my eyes when I'm on a phone reading. If I'm demonstrating, of course, I don't close my eyes. I could fall off the stage or something, but it's dangerous to do that.
You see like in your mind's eye almost? Do you have a screen like I do? Or is it just like here in front?
It's like a little like tiny light. It's almost like in a cross and it gets larger and larger and comes towards
more
me.
In front of you.
Yes.
Interesting.
And then I see the people on the sides coming forth. And then that's how I identify whether they're.
So anybody who's crossed could come on either side.
Right. And that I'm using left is mother's side and the right is father's side for me.
So interesting.
And then again, like Janet, the ones that come behind, like she does with the chair, I see it in my head as like grandparents coming in behind or anybody that's passed before. If they're coming in behind a spirit, I know that they were there in spirit before the other one passed and help them to make the transition. So, I get a lot. I don't like to do Zoom readings for the reason that I don't like to see people's faces. I don't like to read body language. I want it to be all from the spirit. And some people say, well, isn't it more validating when you have an in-person session? And the answer is no. And I've also asked Julie at the Windbridge about this. And she said, we've collected enough data to know that readings are more accurate when somebody is not in the room with the person. Phone readings, long distance readings, whatever.
Because there's no distraction, right?
There's no distraction. You're just working purely with the spirit. You're not worried. We're always under the gun. So whether even we think that, I've been doing this for 20 years, I'm confident, I know I can do this. There's always that nervousness. I mean, I get it. I don't know if Janet, Laura, if you get it. But there's a nervous energy of being under the gun.
It's like a very high, it's almost like having to translate another language and get it right so fast.
Yes, because it comes in so fast.
That honor and responsibility and not wanting to mess it up for the other side, right? So there's that pressure and that desire to want to make sure we're getting it right so quickly.
And then what if you knock and no one answers the door? And you're sitting on the phone going,
Has that ever happened to you?
No, well, that's why I always do my work beforehand and get information to connect before.
Two of you, I could never do that. I have a deal with my guides. I made them my spiritual bouncers and I'm like, keep me shut until I'm about to read. And every now and then somebody's loved one will come in like 10 minutes before I read. I'm like, go away. I'm not going to be able to remember this. I don't have a pen and paper because I'm always going like 100 miles a minute. So they know like the moment I'm open, I'm all theirs. But before that, so it fascinates me that you guys are like, hey, I'm okay with this. Let me get a pen and paper. Let me write down everything you want to tell me ahead of time. I'm amazed by that. For me too, it's so much energy when they come through that like when you're doing that ahead of time, are you exhausted from that? Are you feeling like very spinny energy? Like, how does that go for you?
Well, for me, I don't get exhausted when I tune in beforehand. The energy level feels different when like I'm with the client and then working with the energy. I feel like the spirit becomes stronger. And I have to raise my vibration higher to keep that connection as to just little blips of words. And I think some of my best work has come from getting information beforehand. Even during demonstrations, I'll sit in the back room and I'll meditate. And one of my first demonstrations that I ever did with a couple other well-known mediums was probably about over 15 years ago. And there was like 150 people coming. And the night before, I sat down at the kitchen table and I'm there and I'm eating pizza and I got a pen and paper and I'm like, oh my God, please somebody talk to me because I want to be prepared for tomorrow. I want to look like a fool up there. You know, it's like my debut on stage, my first time. And all of a sudden I started to get an image of a kiosk in a mall that was selling hermit crabs. You know how they do it? I don't know, around here they do it during the holidays. They paint the shells with different flags of countries and different designs, and then they sell them. And I said, why am I getting this? What the heck? I got a hermit crab coming in from Spirit. I said, who is going to want to answer to that? And then I heard Arizona, and I'm like, Arizona. Okay, well, I'm just going to write that down. When I got up for my turn at first time ever being on stage with a mic in front of an audience, a man came through, a gentleman who was this little boy's grandfather, described the kind of, I still have an image in his mind as, you know, you two probably do too. When you connect with somebody, you can remember sometimes of that image of what that spirit looked like or felt like you're going back into that energy. And as I talk about it right now, I feel like I'm going back into that gentleman's energy as I talk about him. I can remember exactly how he came through with the white button-up shirt and the tucked in khaki pants and short white hair. And this little boy was really close to his grandfather, and his name was John. I know it's a common name, but that was his name. And I said, there's a John here. And I described what he looked like physically to me and his age. And I said, he's showing me hermit crabs. Does anybody understand that? One woman got up and said, my son just lost his hermit crab last night. And his grandfather passed just before that. And so he was really, really upset that he lost his grandfather. Then he lost his hermit crab. So the grandfather was trying to come through and say, don't worry, I've got the hermit crab with me and I'm around you and I love you.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my God, who's going to even understand a hermit crab from Spirit?
Yeah.
And then the next message was, okay, there's somebody here connected with Arizona. And I got this woman coming through. And this event was a small event, not nationally advertised. It was in Marlborough, Massachusetts at a hotel. And this one woman stood up and said, I understand that. I'm from Arizona and that's my mother. She said, I wasn't supposed to come today, but a friend had a ticket and I was coming to Boston. So I said, sure, I'll go. And so somehow Spirit knew she'd be there out of all people. And I think from those experiences that I spoke about, it's made me believe that don't take anything for granted that Spirit shows you, because you don't live their life. You've never lived their life. So their experience, of course, are going to be different than yours. And like a hermit crab, I've never had one, but let's bring it through. It keeps coming back to me. They keep showing me this image. I keep them showing me the gentleman, and it all connected and made sense. And like I said before, it's trusting. It really is a process of unfolding that I think when we start to learn to open up psychically or mediumistically, that we develop new neural pathways in our brain. Yeah. We work with something new. The brain says, wow, this is new and exciting, you know, and let's grow this. Because, you know, what do we use really, like 10% of our brain or something like that? Yeah. We don't use a lot of it. So what's it all doing? This gray matter sitting inside your head. What else is it doing? Maybe, you know, this is a way we're all supposed to be. Yeah. We're all supposed to recognize that we all have a gift and we can all develop this with the right training or the right teachers. And I get very excited talking about it because I love to see budding mediums. People say they come to the first class and say, you know, I don't think I can do this. I don't think I'm a medium. I'm not going to last the 12 weeks. After like 10 weeks, they're giving evidential messages from Spirit. And I remind them, first day, you said you'd never be able to do this. So, you know, I encourage everybody to give it a try. So I think that, so I think with you, Laura and Janet, do you have like a certain like clairaudience or clairvoyancy that you feel like it's your stronger suit, so to speak, when you're reading, or is it kind of all balanced out?
Well, Janet, I want to hear from you next, because you talked a little bit about your process of writing down things that were coming, but I'd love to hear like how you're getting your information. You know, what fascinates me is and I'll talk about it in a little bit, my screen, but
Mhm.
Joanne, it sounds like you have like kind of this screen in front of you, right? But you hear a lot and then you see. Janet, what is it like for you? What's the experience of reading like for you?
I think mainly is, when like I said, I meditate and I close my eyes, I will see images. Clairaudience, probably the most, or the strong, or clairvoyance, I'm sorry, is the strongest for me, is I see images where you see, and what will happen is I'll get like images in front of me, but they'll be like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all in a row, like really quick.
Right in
And
front.
so if you lay them next to each other, they're like this. So what I have to do is start separating them. And that's why I write stuff down, because I will get something really quick from somebody, but I won't see like a full body image all the time of them. I don't always get, someone appearing. It doesn't happen all the time, believe me. It's, I'll just see it in my mind, but I'll see, maybe sometimes I'll see the whole figure, and I might see like if there's a beam of light coming through them, sometimes that might be where they were injured, or they may impress on me. I do open myself and allow myself for them to, let me feel something, if I have a certain pain, or, my arm or my head hurts or this hurts or whatever. And I do try to allow that and share that with, the client. A lot of times I'll see, like one time I said I only saw a head, and it was really clear and it was right there in front of me and freaked the heck out of me. And I wanted to cry, and I'm just like, okay. And I'm like, okay, I'm getting, it was just, it'll kind of overwhelm me a little bit. And I'll be like, okay, chill. It's like, get back there. And you can tell by who comes through what they're like. So, sometimes people will come through and you're kind of like, I'm not really sure they would have been my favorite, but, they had a really hard life and maybe they weren't the best person, but they tried. So, okay, let's write that down. And, I just write everything down that comes to me. It could be, maybe I see their hair, I like if they have long hair, or they have, whatever. And I just start writing as many personality traits about them, or if they come through with saying something, kind of like what Joanne will say, if there's something specific, or, for example, there was a woman I was reading, and she, gave me the okay to say this. And I, we were talking about her daughter coming through, and with that, my doorbell rang, and I'm like, there's nobody at my door, and my doorbell rang, and she's like, I heard that. And my daughter does that every day at that time. And she even knew. And I was like, oh my God. And so I do enjoy that part of it when I get something, I've had things move on my desk. I'm very, you could say very picky. In particular, I require everything to be just right on my desk because of that reason. I've had that for years and years, where I really want things to look a certain way. And so, I mean, I'll even have like a reading in the morning, and, my office isn't too far away from the bedroom. And I will wake up in the middle of the night and be like, okay, they're moving something. They're letting me know they're coming, they're here.
Wow.
And sure enough, I'll wake up and I've even taken pictures of it. I have pictures that have turned sideways. I've had little angels on stands that have turned. I've had my printer has gone off. I mean, I've had a lot of physical things.
But they tell you ahead of time. So you'll wake up in the morning and be like, oh, they left me a surprise.
Right. Well, yeah. And that's what I like about it, is a lot of times they'll kind of give me a little heads up. One time I used to, and maybe this is a bad thing to say, but I would have the TV on in the background, just kind of have it on mute. And I don't know if I always thought it was something energetic. I liked all the, electronics and energy in the room. Right? And I thought that was always kind of nice. And I would finish and I'd look over and would say, it would freeze. The screen would be frozen, women in spirit. And I'm like, yes, that's what I got.
Oh,
So,
wow.
I mean, it's just, I've always been open to that. I've had so many weird experiences. You could ask my family, and it doesn't happen all the time. I mean, I'm not one of these, it's like every day. It's just, I pay attention. I stay open to what is going on around me. It's like if there's something, when they come through, it depending on where they stand. And, if they come in and you get a certain feel, how does that feel to you in real life? Who does that feel like to you in real life? If I don't see them, but I feel their energy and I know they're there, I might say, okay, how does this make me feel? And I'm like, this is definitely a spouse, or this is a partner, or this is this, and or this is a child. And as soon as I recognize it and I start writing it, I ask them, I always ask the other side, what can you show me? I'm from the show me state. What can you show me? And so then I allow them to show me whatever they want to show me in whatever way. And even when I like close it down for, before the reading, or when I'm, before I have to read in a couple days, I might be in the other room and I'll just be sitting there. And if I'm still kind of in my own head, I might be open and think, oh, wow, I think there's something more, and I'll go back in and write it down, because that's just kind of the way I've always worked. And, maybe, I could do it a lot easier, I'm sure, but it's just, that's who I am personally.
I think it's what works for you. So I have a question. When you do the actual session with the sitter,
Mm-hmm.
do the people on the other side come through to you in that session too, or you've already
Yes.
connected with them and you have all the information? It's like, do you
Yes.
reopen that door then?
Yes,
But you've
I
already
do.
got
They know that.
pages and notes.
Yeah, they know.
They've
And
told
here's,
you.
I always, like I said, I always do this I do 3 little meditations before reading, because I always feel like I could have a bad day. They could be off somewhere. Who knows what's going on for them? And maybe I'm not connected right. So I like to do it that way. And then the day of, I invite them in. I'm like, okay, this is last time. And then you're going with them, out the door you go. And, if there's anything you want to, anything else you want to share, then you can do it then. And that's kind of the way, I personally, work.
That's really neat. One of the things I want everybody who's joining us today to know too, there's no one set way to do it. There's no one right way to be psychic or to be a medium.
Right.
And I think it's so important to hear that even with the 3 of us, we have such different processes and different ways of getting information. For me, I told you before, my deal is no spirits in my visual, right? My spirit guides are my bouncers. They keep me shut until I've agreed to be open. And when I do a reading, I'm with you, Joanne. And I don't know if this is the same for you too, Janet, but like, I love reading over the phone because I close my eyes and I just kind of lose myself and I'm just watching my screen. I like dive into my screen. So for me, and it's interesting because I'm hearing you say both of your visuals are here. Mine is above here. It's like I look kind of up and it's this wide screen. It almost looks like old school teacher's blackboard or a movie screen. And it's divided into the left-hand side and the right-hand side. I have it super organized. And the left-hand side is where I get all my psychic information, and the right-hand side is where the mediumship comes in. And for me, the psychic information can be movie clips. It can be timelines with like sometimes very specific dates about soul cycles my client completed or were coming up, or important moments on their soul journey at certain ages. I get so much information. I can at the same time hear things. I can be made to feel things, which is, Janet, you were saying you'll let them make you feel things. Same with me. I know what congestive heart failure feels like to me versus a heart attack that they'll show me. And it's a physical sensation. So it's this multi-sensory language that's going on. And I always tell people too, it's not in English. It's this really rapid emotional language that I translate into English. And I'm sure for you too, like you've read people or pets on the other side that don't speak English at all, but we fully understand it. And when I'm doing a reading like that, I'll be allowed to hear like a snippet of the language to be able to identify like, oh, your grandparents spoke Russian, or oh, that your father spoke, Japanese, or whatever it might be. But then I understand it. So for me, it's like a very inner process, and it's never ahead of time. Although, like I said, that has happened sometimes. And it's funny you mentioned Forever Family events too, because it was the one in my very beginning when I was doing a session for parents who had lost children. I got in my car, and this is in my book. It's like they bombarded me. I was like, no, wait till I get there. I can't. So
spirit hitchhikers.
Yeah, but I love that you guys allow for that and invite that. I'm always like, okay, don't open me till I'm, there. You guys both believe, I think, the same thing I do, that we all have these abilities, right? And the more Joanne, I loved what you said about your theory behind it is that we train our brain to open new doorways. It's so true. Are there any specific activities or exercises you would say? For me, I never had a teacher. I was completely on my own. I didn't even know anybody else who did this till the night I tested for Forever Family Foundation. So when I do my workshops, I've done some online now because I love doing in person, but COVID's been going on. Yeah. I always try to take people through what I went through, how I kind of the layers that I learned to like develop, honor and understand my psychic abilities in the mediumship. Is there any tips you can give people how to continue to like open their ability? Like, for example, I think just being part of today's Zoom, because when you're around like-minded people, it just opens your energy. And when we talk or we think about these things, it opens it. But is there any additional tips either of you would give?
Yeah, definitely. I would start writing it down. If you try to meditate, write down, start writing things down. But a lot of times people say, I can't meditate. I don't know how to do it. Well, figure out your own way, how you want to meditate. You don't have to follow a script. You can just sit and listen to music, ask what you need to know, see if any loved ones are around. And I always write it down and then I date it and I time it, because that's a validation. If it comes through, then you can say, hey, I did get it on this day. I did see this. I did know this was happening. And that helps you for, your psychic side, but you can also ask a loved one to come through and, try to set a date with them. If you want to, you're going to go out to lunch with a friend, say you want to go out, you want to meet your, get together with a loved one and sit and meditate just with them. And even if you're just thinking of them, just, think about them for a little while and let it go and then see what comes through. See, do you feel something? Do you hear something? Do you smell something? How does that work for you? And just go in that route and see, what's best for you. So, I mean, that's just one suggestion I would suggest.
Great suggestion. Joanne, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I think that awareness is a key part of developing our abilities, whether it be psychic or mediumistic abilities. So being more aware of things, of not taking everything for granted, maybe just being more of a good listener. Sometimes people will talk and then we just kind of nod our heads and then we don't remember what they said and and that kind of thing, because we're thinking about I gotta go home, I gotta do this, I gotta do that.
Being present, right? It's so hard sometimes.
It's hard, and we have to train our brains to do that. And I also find that the more my conclusion about working with spirit is that the more experiences you have in life will help you with your mediumship. For instance, if I've traveled to Europe, then I know what the city of Paris looks like. If I've never seen pictures of the Eiffel Tower, then I know what that looks like. So if I'm bringing something through in a reading where Paris is a very important validation for a loved one in spirit, maybe it was a trip to Paris or the Eiffel Tower, then I know, I'm not saying you have to go to Europe and travel to do this, but I'm saying every experience you have, I feel that spirit is very intelligent. And then the client that you do the reading with, some of that intelligence that you have of those experiences will come forth in a reading that may not have come forth with another medium. So I always feel, and I've always put out the intention from day one, that if I can help somebody, please, I'd be happy to open myself to helping anyone that I can help. So I always feel and trust that if somebody comes to me, I'm helping them in some way. It may not be particularly, what if somebody just wants to connect with George in spirit and George doesn't come through? Then would Aunt Sally be okay? Or maybe there's something else that comes through on a psychic level, whatever it might be, that I'm a vehicle of spirit of the universe to be a conduit to help other people. And my information comes in, I hear it, I see it, I feel it, I know it. I know that if somebody has diabetes, for instance, then I can pick that up because I've been through that experience. I've been diagnosed with it, so I know I have a relationship, so to speak, with certain physical issues that will come up in a reading that I've experienced. Besides, travels and other things, I feel like spirit has your mind is like this open encyclopedia, and they're constantly downloading and filling it and giving you information to help other people. I absolutely love the connection. And when those pieces that you think, well, I have this piece of information, are they going to understand like Saginaw, Michigan? And all of a sudden they're like, yeah, that's where I grew up. And even though I live in New York, that's where I grew up. And, it's like, why would I get Saginaw, Michigan or Rochester, Minnesota, when I've never even been to those places?
Trust it when you get it.
Trust it. And patience, people will say, I want to learn how to do this now so I can do a reading tomorrow. It doesn't work that way. You think of way things grow. You got it like a seed you plant, you give it water, you give it sunshine, and you're patient and you watch that plant grow and bloom. And our unfoldment is the same process. It's just like that. Nurture yourself, read books, take classes, meditate for sure. Meditation is something that's going to change the configuration within your mind about working with spirit. It's going to open up that portal that helps you to receive information and know that you can talk back to the energy, because thoughts are infused with love. And that's the way we connect with our loved ones, is through the thought energy, which is really love that never dies. It only transforms after we lose a loved one. So if we can talk to them from the same love that we communicated with them here, then we're still communicating. And if we hear something back and say, well, I thought that was my spouse, but I'm probably making it up because I want him to come through, or him or her, you have to stop doing that. You know, you have
Right.
to start saying, this is what it is, and maybe just write it down. Like Janet said, keep a journal, of your experiences. I always encourage students to keep a journal. And I always encourage people to learn from the ground up, learn about energy, learn about chakras, learn about auras, learn about all of that so that you understand when you have these experiences what it
Yeah.
is.
Yeah, those are such great points. So much of what both of you are saying resonates with me too. And I think meditation is key to all this. I think the idea that we can talk back and communicate is so important and get tangible proof of that, which that's why I'm all about signs, create a
Yes.
language with your loved ones on the other side. Ask for specific proof, if you will, that they heard you back, and it can be fascinating. I also think personally, I don't know if either of you have ever done acupuncture, but I find that is a really interesting experience that seems to really just get my energy flowing. And I've only more recently started going weekly for acupuncture, but I'm finding it's really balancing what I call that triangle that's going on all at all times for us, which is our light energy, our spiritual energy, right, in this physical body that's never comfortable, on a cellular level. And then the third part is your free will. So it gives you clarity and balance. And I think yoga might help with that too. I've heard a lot of people who do yoga almost all of a sudden get clairvoyant, or they start getting cognizant downloads, or they hear things clairaudiently. So I would suggest that to people, and surrounding yourself with music. I don't know if the two of you were at the dinner that Fran and Bob gave years ago at their home, where Fran said that she had a theory on us as collective mediums together. And she asked us how many of us had been surrounded by music as children. Were you at that dinner?
I don't think I was at that one.
I don't think I was
It
either.
might have been for more like local people. You are
Probably
every
one of the garden
hand went up.
parties at one time.
Yeah. Every hand went up that we'd all been either deeply infused with music or playing musical instruments or listening to music. So I always tell people, listen to music. And I like what you said too, Joanne, about just trust what you're going to get, because what's become apparent to me is I'm not the mind of God. And I also know that if I'm doing a session with somebody, they're going to share with me whatever is in that sitter's highest path to know. So even when I do my mediumship, which is on my right-hand screen, I'm not very divided. A person's mother's side of the family will come in as points of light to my upper right-hand side. Father's side will come from the bottom right-hand side, and friends, families, that's everything else comes in the middle. And so it's very easy for me to understand who I'm communicating in that sense. And it won't always initially right away be maybe the person, who the sitter thought would come through first. Sometimes somebody comes in to say a quick hi, and then this main person kind of steps through.
Yep.
So it's trusting in that too. And that's what I'd love everybody who's part of today's Zoom to know, trust whatever you're getting. Don't worry about it. They're on it. It's that sort of thing. Should we switch to Q&A now? This is always my favorite part when we take questions from the audience.
We prepare, and you guys talked about meditation to try to help to develop these a little bit, and how you each talked about different ways you prepare for this. Have you, if someone is having experiences, maybe they're having dreams, and these dreams are giving them information, but they don't really know what it is, and they don't understand what to do with it, where would you recommend that they go to learn more about this?
The Rhine.
Good answer.
That's honestly my answer.
Oh, that's funny.
And books to a reading list, which the Rhine provides. This is not planned, but I have to say, and everybody watching is aware of the Rhine, but I wish more people were, because you're such a font of resources, and it's done in such an academic, thoughtful, intelligent way. I think so often in this community, you have so much woo-woo going on that's really unverifiable. And if you look at the realm of psychic mediumship, it's got a pretty bad rap going back to the Victorian ages, with fraud and all sorts of things. And then in the modern age, you have people who haven't really fully developed it, maybe putting themselves out there, and maybe some people who haven't developed it at all, but wanting to take advantage of people, and places like the Rhine, Forever Family Foundation, Windbridge, they really have done the work, and they're doing the research. The Rhine does research on this, and you have speakers that come in on a myriad of topics, from lucid dreaming to past life recall to remote healing to remote viewing. I mean, so many fascinating topics. So the Rhine's my go-to place.
Good answer.
Well, I appreciate that answer very much, Laura, and I agree with you 100%, but I want to also add, maybe they could read your books. that, really they can learn a lot about what the experience is and how other people have developed these skills. And Janet, I haven't seen your book. I'd love to get
Oh,
a
it's
copy of your book.
good.
Oh, wow.
Because,
Send you one.
I think
Good.
from learning from other people and hearing what other people's experiences are, you can really develop your own. Do you agree with this?
Yeah.
Yeah,
And I mean, a lot of it's trial, it's trial and error. You have to find your own way and figure out your own signs, figure out your own valid, your own symbols. And with, dreaming, I would definitely say, Ryan, I would definitely say, read some books. I would definitely say, if you wake up after you have this crazy dream, don't look into just the dream of how crazy it was. Start cutting it down. I always divide it down. What does this section of the dream mean? What does that section of the dream mean? And sometimes after, just by doing that, you can actually piece together some kind of answer of something that's going on in your life. Or, maybe it could be, precognitive. And so if that's the case, then, write it down and date it, and then you have it for in the future. So.
Great.
Write it down before you forget it, because dreams you forget very quickly. I used to keep a small tape recorder by my bed and speak into it so I remember, because it can leave you so quickly. And some of these things you really want to remember, they're amazing experiences, and things maybe you didn't ever think about or ever thought you would dream about, especially connections with loved ones.
Yeah.
They often visit us in dream state, and if they do, they're looking well and happy. They're not looking sick and upset. If they look sick, I always say that's just a dream. It's your subconscious mind going through the process of dealing with the grief. But if they come through and they're saying, I feel so good and I'm happy, I don't have cancer and I love you and I miss you, and they're, looking great, that I would say to someone is a validation.
So, Joanne, you talk a lot about spirit and connecting to spirit. A really good question came in. The connections you make, are these spirits that come to you, are they all knowledgeable? Like, can you get answers to them about physics questions if you ask them and things? I mean, how much do they really know?
Well, as far as loved ones coming through, connecting with loved ones, they're just themselves. So if somebody, let's say, was a businessman, I may see him with a suit and a briefcase. It tells me they were in business. They were a good business person. I may see him handshaking other people. It tells me that they were adored by a lot of people and did well in business, for instance. They're not going to give me the theory of gravity, unless maybe if it was Einstein or somebody else or Newton or somebody in physics, they would probably give me that information, or maybe not. Maybe they just want, if I was doing a reading for Einstein's fifth cousin and he came through, then he may not talk about, everything he put on that chalkboard, all those formulas. He may just say, I miss you, I love you, and I'm okay, I'm not sick anymore. So it really is up to the spirit. I don't think they're going to waste the energy or the time with a medium talking about something that their loved one really doesn't care to hear. Like, if they were a teacher and they taught philosophy and go into this whole philosophical dissertation or during a reading, the loved one may say, well, what about me? What are they saying about me? So anything can happen, but I don't think it would be wise to have a reading for the sake of finding out information in science or physics necessarily. Some people do channel entities or loved ones that maybe can provide that information, maybe in a deeper state of trance channeling or something. For me, I use mental mediumship. I don't feel that you have to go into this whole full trance state to make connections. And that's the way the ordinary person would make a connection. Somebody that wants to connect with their loved one. They don't have to go into some deep state and go into all this whole ritual process. It's a matter of just closing your eyes and talking to them and just see what happens, see what comes back. It may come back right away. It may come back as a sign later. A bird might come to the window that maybe they love cardinals and this bird is tapping with its beak on the window and you say, oh my God, I was just thinking about my mother and she loved cardinals. And little things that we miss. Like I said before, it's about awareness. Psychic development and even mediumship is about opening your awareness, because we're hyper aware when we're making connections, and that's how we do it, because we're so aware of every feeling in our body and the words that come into our mind and the things that we see. All of that comes together in a reading, and we have to be really hyper focused on, oh, I just got a pain in my stomach. Did they have a problem with their stomach? It's something that doesn't hurt the medium. When I say pain, they've experienced a pain, but it's enough to prompt the medium to say they had a stomach problem before they passed. Or I might feel like my left leg feels kind of strange, and do they have an amputation from the knee down? I feel, the certain things that we sense when we're open and aware. So like I said, it's working on yourself. It does take time. It's not something that you can't become instant medium overnight. It's not like instant oatmeal where the next day, you got it all together and that's it. Even if you're a natural medium, I think we still need to organize our mediumship to learn how to present it so that the client or the sitter can recognize the information. If we start just rambling off, oh, I hear the name John and I don't know, there's a man here. Well, that could be anybody, right?
Could be me.
So, yeah, right. It could be you, John. Anybody. But when you start to give the description and they can form that picture in their mind, the physical description, the personality of a person, their quirks, their hobbies, their interests in life, their shared memories, things they did with you when you were younger. There's no denial. That's not something that anybody can even Google or, maybe some people think mediums hire private investigators, but I can only imagine that would be more than what a medium session costs. So why would a medium do that? And so we're here, really mediums, all of us here are professional mediums. We do it every day, and we're here to prove life after death, and that this is a real thing, and that everybody has the ability to open up and do this work.
So, I always liked what Julie Beischel would say. She'd say, if my Uncle Paul didn't know how to pick the lottery numbers when he was alive, why would you expect him to be able to do it after he died?
Exactly.
So, but you often talk in terms of spirit, and a lot of you have a lot of connections in the spirit world. Does this relate to religion at all? Organized religion? Like, is there a heaven?
Well, I think the heaven.
I'm asking the easy questions, right?
Yeah.
Heaven is the spirit world to me, and my religion that I've become a reverend in, which is the religion of spiritualism. Actually, one of our principles is life, believing that life after death, that we physically die, but we don't die. Our spirit doesn't die, and that's the survival of consciousness, and that's what we communicate with. Yeah, sure. I think most religions don't believe in it because of fear. And there's a whole patriarchal order to religion to get you to follow a certain way of life. And I think that when we really find ourselves and discover our abilities, our opinions about religion may change. There's not many Western religions that believe in life after death. You'd find that mostly in some Eastern religions, but not in the Western religions. But I think mediumship has become more mainstream now.
I mean, Christianity believes in heaven, right? And life after death. And that's right. That's Western.
What is it again? Which one?
Christianity, right? That's where the concept of heaven comes from, right?
But they don't believe in mediums. They don't believe you should bother the dead. And neither does the Jewish religion or Catholicism.
Well, but I guess I'm wondering, from your own experiences, do you relate it to organized religions? Laura and Janet, do you guys relate it to organized religions? Or?
Go ahead, Laura. I mean, I can.
Okay, well, I don't. I think it's really interesting to look at the NDE, the Near-Death Experience community, that is cross-cultural. And there is an existence after this, whether or not you have the belief in that prior to crossing or not. And I've had plenty of people come through from the other side and say, my loved one's not going to believe this is really me, and that I'm actually coming through, because I had zero belief. In fact, I was talked against it before I crossed, right? So I don't think you need to be religious or have the belief in order to have consciousness continue after bodily death. Do I think religion can be a really helpful vehicle to understanding the love of what I'd call God energy, which is this force of love that connects us all, because we're all here learning a collective lesson in love, and we're all intertwined with each other's journeys? Yes, I think the wonderful sides of religion can be a vehicle. Like, I might get in my white SUV and drive to the grocery store, and somebody else gets on their motorcycle and drives there, and somebody else takes a bike, and somebody else gets in their red convertible, but we're all getting there. It's a vehicle to get in one place to the other. So I think religions can be beautiful and layer one's understanding, right? But is it a prerequisite to make it to the other side? No. I think the NDE community shows that there is another side, and whether you call it heaven or you call it something else. I know every time I read, I go to this place and they come there. It's almost like this screen, this veil between here and there. And, you know, I had my own experience with my grandfather crossed when I was young, of him showing me where he was. I had a dream that I went there and I was all excited. I'm like, wait, where are the pearly gates? This isn't what I heard about in religion class. And he's like, there's no pearly gates. It was like this beautiful darkness and filled with light at the same time. And I was very aware that there was this kind of veil that I wasn't allowed to go into. I needed to come back from. But so I do believe in this concept of heaven, or the really existence of consciousness after bodily death, that we're somewhere else. But I don't think you need to be religious or have religion be part of that to understand it. Can it be a really helpful tool when you arrive? You know, yes. Can it make your process of your soul leaving your physical body much more fluid and like much less, you know, fear-based? Yes, religion for certain people can help be this beautiful, you know, vehicle of understanding and transition. So that's my answer. Janet, what do you think?
Yeah, I was going to say, I was raised Catholic, and you know, when I was younger, I always went to church trying to listen to when they would talk about people like me having these experiences. You know, it wasn't somebody in a Bible. It's just, I wanted a normal person. And so I kind of veered away from it because I wasn't getting the answers I needed. Now, if somebody somebody is religious and they follow that, I think that's great. I think it's individual. For me, I had to go in a different direction, and I look at it more as the universe and that it's energy and the vibrations. And so I veer towards that way. I think it's beautiful if you have a faith and that is helping you through wherever you need to go in life and whatever you need and whatever religion you are. For me personally, I had to go a little bit different direction because it wasn't answering the questions I needed because of what I was experiencing. So I knew I needed to go in a different direction. But obviously you can go any way. You know, there's no one set pattern, and we're all individual and we all take an individual path. And that's mine. But I also want to add one other thing about the dream thing, which I thought about afterwards, and I wanted to answer, was one thing I learned back in, the 90s. I went to an ARE conference with Henry Reed, and he talked about dreams, and he said, remember them backwards. When you wake up, if you start writing it backwards, you remember a lot more than when you try to start at the beginning, because all of a sudden you lose it. But if you start backwards, then all of a sudden you can remember more and more and more of the dream. And that does happen. And I do that. I've done that. So that is a big thing that all of a sudden it clicked, but I just remembered now. So I wanted to add it.
What does ARE stand for?
Association for Research and Enlightenment with Edgar Cayce. You know, that was one thing that when I was little, my dad used to read about Edgar Cayce, and I'm like, who is this guy? You know, can we meet him? You know, and so yeah, so that was one of the interesting things too. So
yeah, Henry is an amazing guy, and he, you know, he's so funny and such a character, and
yeah,
he's done really so much research on dreams. He's a really wonderful resource.
Yeah, so he would be a really good resource to follow too. So yeah,
he did a lot of dream interpretation, and I think that the most important thing is faith. No matter what religion you come from, a lot of us follow our parents or our grandparents. We're born into a religion. Doesn't mean we necessarily have to stay in that religion. If it doesn't resonate with us, then I always tell people, look for other spiritual places, spiritual communities that resonate with you, because not all religious people or religions are actually spiritual. I think there's a difference. And I think for most mediums, it's not always more about religion, but it's more about the spiritual aspect.
Wonderful answer. That's great. So, Janet, this language. So how does this work? I mean, do you know what you're saying when you're saying it, or is it more like you're like channeling or being a puppet, and these are just coming out of you? How does this work?
Well, first of all, I do not know exactly what is being said. I sometimes will see an image or a picture, and I can associate that with, you know, with what's coming through. Sometimes when I speak it, I will get a sense of beings. And so I know that I don't know word for word what is coming through. And that's why I had to have a translator. When I feel it, it comes straight to the top. It comes, the farthest it goes is probably about halfway up. I will feel it sometimes in my hands or arms and in my, mainly in my face or my mouth. I mean, when it starts to come, it's like on my tongue and I have to speak it. And if I stop and they're not finished, then it will keep going. And I've already been in the grocery store when it first started coming through. I always crack up about that with the grocery store references and mediumship, because I was walking down, I'll never forget this. It was a cereal aisle, and I all of a sudden it's like, oh no, Sunny, I did it. And I was just like, oh my gosh, what do I do? And so I went home and I just said, okay, we need to have a conversation. I'm not sure exactly who you all are coming through, but you have to allow it on my time, in my way, or I'm not speaking it. And that cleared it up. And it was, so it was kind of like, it's like, I'm allowing you to come through if you have a message, but at the same time, I have a life and I have to, you have to do it when I'm available. So, that's how it works for me. But yeah, I feel it a lot of times in my throat and, my tongue. And I do feel like there are spirits around and they do help me, and they definitely give me warnings. If if it comes through spontaneous, when I'm not even like, when I don't allow it, like I did today, if it comes through spontaneous, it's usually a warning. And it's like, okay, heads up, there's something happening today. They want to let me know, I need to pay attention, and go from there. And it does happen almost every time. I mean, I was almost in a car accident and the language came through and I stepped on the brake. And sure enough, an 18-wheeler came backing out and cars were going everywhere. And I just sat there and I was like, thank you. I appreciate your, assistance. So, yeah.
So even if you don't understand what's coming through, just the fact that it's happening is a warning for you.
Well, if it happens spontaneous, if it just pops through and it's like, oh my gosh, it's, coming through, then I know it is. If it's, something where I'm sitting there and I'm allowing it to come through, I can meditate. And sometimes I'll see like images, kind of clairvoyant images. And then I kind of get a feel for that. But, it's like, otherwise I do not know what is being said word for word. I might feel like there's something healing, or, if I speak it to certain people, I'll be like, oh, they needed something. I can just feel by the way that it's coming through that there's something going on. And then, they might start crying and I'll be like, whoa, 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 but you just never know. So, that's kind of how it is for me. That's why I had a translator.
Can I just say, I'm so glad you just said that about saying it to people, because whenever I'm around you, Janet, I'm always like, can you do the language? Because it's so good. It's like jumping into a cool river, like running over me. And I love it so much. It just feels so great. I'm like, trying to do the language. I think there's some energy that comes through with it.
Yeah, there is energy. I definitely can get a little hyper. Well, okay, I'm hyper anyway, I admit, but I can definitely feel when the energy comes through and it's really strong. It's like, oh boy, here we go. They got a lot to say today, and it just goes like that.
I love that.
And I love the way that you talk about learning to turn it off. You had a conversation,
right?
And you asked, would you work on my terms, just like you would
Right.
have a conversation with anyone,
right?
about
And even
these
with
sorts of
spirit,
things.
even when you're sitting with spirit, like I said, pick a date and say, hey, let's get together. And, and I ask questions. I'm a big one for asking the other side questions. Hey, I don't feel like you're giving me enough. Can you show me something new? And I'm like, come on, show me something new. So it's really important to have that connection and relationship, whether it's with, the languages or the other side, or, anyone in general is, and I always try to focus on that present moment and with it. So that's, when it comes through, it's like, okay, what's going on? And I go from there. And it came through with, there's a story in my book that happened with my son. And I was kind of like, okay. And so when it's a warning, I know, and I pay attention, and then I thank them, for coming through. And it also comes through in both languages. I mean, in female and male, it will come through, both ways. And I think that's kind of cool too, because sometimes I'm like, oh, he had a lot to say today, and other times it's just like, okay, there's something else going on here. And I think that's really a cool factor too. So.
Janet, I think we could probably just talk about this for hours and hours. It's such an interesting thing. It's so enticing, to hear more of it. But I'm going to give you a break for a minute.
Well, sure, thank you.
Because there was some other things you guys were talking about, about being in a supermarket and getting some information and saying, oh, geez, I want to tell someone, but there's ethical limitations. Can you talk a little bit about those things? Because I think it's a really good topic to discuss.
Absolutely. Okay.
Go ahead.
Hello.
We can take turns.
Yeah, I think it's really important. I'm sure like Laura and Janet, you've heard stories of people sharing their readings with other psychics saying that the psychic said this or said that, and it just doesn't resonate, doesn't make sense. It almost feels unethical. For instance, I remember when I first went out on my own, started to do phone readings, I had a reading with a woman and I brought through a husband that had passed, and they showed me like on the Flintstones. I remember this image very specifically, the gravel pit where Fred Flintstone worked. And his passing was at a work site. He worked in construction, and one of the drivers of the heavy equipment actually didn't see him and ran him over. And he passed from the accident. And so I brought that through, and then the client said to me, I just had a reading with a psychic, and she said, I'm so upset because the psychic told me that my husband cheated on me. And I'm really upset about that, besides that I love him and he passed and I miss him. And she was really very, very emotionally upset. And I can remember how I felt so angry. I felt so upset that some psychic would say that to somebody when they're grieving, even if that was the truth. If that was the case, she wasn't asking if her husband was cheating. She wanted to know if her husband was around and had a message for her and she could communicate with him. And I remember saying, we need like psychic police, because there are people out there that are just, damaging people more. And we're really here to help people. We're not here to upset them. And we want to help bring healing. We want to bring closure. We want to let them know that love never dies, that they will meet up with their loved ones someday and they can talk to them at any time, that love is in our thoughts, in our heart. And that's the language of spirit communication, is the language of love. It's a universal language, no matter where they were from or what country or what language they spoke. It's a universal language. And it doesn't go away once the physical body dies. It's always there and around, but maybe we're not so aware of it because we're used to the physical presence. So I think, from that day on, I was thinking we really need to have like ethical standards or testing for all psychics and mediums, like that Janet and Laura and I all went through with Forever Family and Windbridge. There has to be some sort of screening process or something, because not everybody doing this work out there is what I would call ethical. I'd never tell a client, it wouldn't be ethical for me to say, you have cancer and you're going to die in 6 months. I may say, well, I feel like you need to go to your doctor. Don't forget, we have personal liability too, because we're not doctors. We can't diagnose somebody. We're psychics. Everything that we're doing is either coming from spirit as a medium or psychically what we're feeling. But what if we're just feeling that they need to get this checked and they can be diagnosed and treated? I think if on the other end, if I was the client, I'd rather hear that than for a psychic to say, you've got 6 months to live, you've got cancer, and you don't even know it. We can't be that sure to jeopardize somebody's mental health by saying these kind of things that may be true, but may not be 100% true. I'm very careful the way I get that across to people, because like I said, I don't feel it's ethical to diagnose. We're not doctors, or give specific information about a court case. Maybe we can just say, this is what my intuition is telling me, that you are going to win this case, but not to give legal advice, because we're not lawyers. We're not, we can't take the place of professionals that are needed in someone's life. They're calling us for answers.
What about when you give information to someone, when it's appropriate and when it's not? Like we see on TV shows certain people that might go up to people in the street and talk to them. Is this appropriate, or how would you guys?
Never.
Laura,
I
how
don't
would
do
you
that.
talk
I would
about
not do that.
It's a sacred gift. Communication is sacred with spirits, and it takes a lot of energy from the medium and the spirit, and it's very emotional for the people who are receiving the information. Not everybody is ready for it, and not everybody is open to it. Going back to one of my first experience in the supermarket, I felt like I was jumping out of my skin. I wanted to tell her so bad that I saw her mother standing next to her, but I had to leave the store and just let it go. Because, what if it scared her, or she started crying, or God only knows what kind of a reaction she might have had. And she didn't request for me to do a reading. When somebody opens themselves, when they come to a demonstration, when they call you to book an appointment, then they're opening themselves up and saying, it's okay. It's okay if you connect, and I'm open to whatever comes through.
Well, and if you go with your friends, you can, if you're both learning or you want to do it with your friends, it's one thing, but you don't stop somebody on the street. You don't go to a restaurant and say, oh, hey, to the waitress, I see something, and could you bring me some extra fries after I told you that? You don't do anything like that.
That's ego, I think. When people do that, they're trying to prove that they can do this. And genuine, real mediums, we don't have to prove ourselves. There's no reason to. We just do our work because it's sacred and it's what we chose to do. It takes a toll on us physically, emotionally, spiritually, but we choose to do it and give our energy in that way to help another person.
I don't know if the two of you remember this, but I remember part of testing for Forever Family Foundation was a questionnaire. It was like the first questionnaire you'd send in about your intentions, why you wanted to become a volunteer, how you felt about things. And one of the questions was, what would you do if you were out somewhere and you got information for a stranger that was near you? And I immediately realized I would not share it because that's unethical. You never know where somebody's going to be in his or her grief journey. I would say to my guides, okay, thanks. If that person wants to arrange that reading or make it happen, have that person come to Forever Family Foundation and have me read for them. You have to trust in that. So I think it's a really clear answer, as to like how we should use our abilities. Look, when I was in my teens and my early 20s, was I always responsible with my abilities? No, I would kind of have fun with them. Ooh, what can I just open my screen and know about you and freak people out a little bit. I met a really great boyfriend now. But I learned in time that to really respect and honor it. It's actually a very sacred and intimate thing. And I would never try to read somebody's energy or purposely read somebody's energy or try to, open my screen and see, if their relatives on the other side had information for them without their explicit permission and desire. I think that's a really important point to make. But Janet, I like what you said about developing your abilities. If you want to pair up with a friend and say like, okay, let's try this, or, think there are other ways you can open and develop abilities than reading people inappropriately. So
Join a group. That's what they're for. Join a circle, and sit and develop and share messages and, see where it goes. That's you only learn from your own practice. You can't just take classes and then go out and do readings if you've never actually read for a person. I think you learn from your yeses and you learn from your nos, and you learn from dealing with people. And, when we're working with the public, anything can happen. When we're working with spirit, any information can come through. Do we want to filter it? No, we really don't want to filter it because that defeats the purpose, but there's always a way of saying it in a manner that is not going to be offensive or unethical to somebody.
So, this is what you recommend, that people kind of get together in groups if they have other people that are similarly minded, that have similar interests, that they can get together. So I know you guys do phone work, and I'm sure that now you're doing things over Zoom or over Skype and things. Do you think that Zoom groups, if people were interested in doing something like that, would be a valuable way for them to help to sharpen their skills and learn more about what they're experiencing?
Maybe the Rhine could form one, right? Where people could join and be a facilitator, and they could do that. I mean, maybe everybody who's part of today's program might be interested in that.
I do teach development circles in the morning and at night, besides a 12-week class that I run. And once the students are complete with the 12-week class, they're able to join either the morning or the evening development group to continue to practice their mediumship and psychic readings. So I think support is really important for the student who wants to learn to really open up properly. That's why I always say, if you don't want to do it online, you want to do it in person, then do the research. Find somebody in your area that, we have the source at our hands, the internet. We can do a lot of research in trying to find either a spiritual church or a new age store, or maybe even just a private teacher that's doing it in their house or a facility. They're out there. There's a lot of people out there, and I always say to students that if you find a teacher and they don't resonate with you, don't feel obligated that you have to stay. It's not for you. Listen to your intuition.
Well, obviously they're out there. They're not only out there, they're in here. Laura, you hit a note because the chat's just full of people. I'll be there.
Everybody wants the Rhine to do the Zoom group, so darn it.
Yeah.
So we'll work on that in the future. You guys have been so generous. There's one additional question that came up, and you guys, I've heard many people speak about children and children being more open and more psychic. Are all children psychic? Can you talk a little bit about that before we go today? Okay. I'd like to, why does that kind of go away at some point?
Janet, you want to?
Or does it?
I feel like you have stuff to say.
Well, I was just going to say that, I totally believe they're open because they don't have any predisposition of what they're supposed to believe or think. So they're just, on the fly, they'll say whatever. My son did that. He told me one time that he really loved me and him and mom and dad. He loved us better than his other parents in Florida because they never used to read to him. And I was like, we'd never been to Florida. I was like, I was just like, that's wonderful. Well, I'm so glad. And, and I mean, kids are just, if you allow them, when they say something, don't cut it off. Just, answer it and go with it and see where it goes, which I think they're very open. And they're, when somebody says, oh, well, you can't say that, well, that shuts them down, and I think they're very, very psychic when they're young, because like I said, they don't have anybody to tell them they're not supposed to think like that, or, they're not supposed to do that. So yeah, I think it's wonderful. And I love listening to them when they do say something and you're like, okay, yeah, I agree with you, and agree with them and let it keep going. And I think that keeps them open, because when you shut them down, that kind of shuts you down, in a way that you were open to getting information. And now you can have, now if they keep going, who knows what they'll say. And I've never done that to my son. I've never shut him down. And, when he comes through with something, I'm just like, yeah, I agree, but you still need to listen to mom. So, yeah.
It touches upon what you were saying before, Joanne, about how even as an adult, even like middle-aged people will come and say, like, I want to reopen to this. And how when you have these experiences, you're open to it, it's retraining pathways in your mind and opening doors, because I think we all come here as children tied to the place we just came. Here we are on earth. We're connected to all people here. We're connected to the energy of where we came from. And our brain is doing all sorts of interesting things. We're not yet locked in what's known as like that frontal lobe, the monkey mind chatter, right? That really starts kindergarten, first grade, and by second grade, I think it's solidified, because the frontal lobe's in charge of analytical thinking, language skills, math, like all the day-to-day stuff, right? And as children, before we really embrace language, what we're doing is reading energy. We're using all different parts of our brain. And I know, I think maybe both of you, I know, Janet, you were like the original one to get mind mapped with what was going on in your mind when you were talking versus reading. Joanne, I don't know if you've had that done.
Yes.
Too. So we all have, right? And what it shows is some remarkable things. What it shows, for me, and I think for both of you as well, is like the frontal lobe brainwave activity silences, and all different parts of our brain light up. Parts that have been associated with like spiritual enlightenment experiences, like people who take mushrooms. Not that we're doing that, we're not. It's just that we're utilizing these other parts of our brain, these other pathways. And I think for children, it's just natural until we get stuck here. And what's the one time everybody's monkey mind silences and goes offline? When we sleep, which is why we all have these precognitive dreams or visitations. It's our opportunity. When people say, I'm going to sleep on it, it's because you're getting spiritual guidance while you sleep. So yeah, I think children are just like in their natural state, right? But the thing is, we can return to that. We just have to be open to it and discard all the materialistic paradigm and what we're told is not possible to embrace what is.
I agree, Laura. That was well said.
Yeah. So that's wonderful. And I really love the way that you described the pre-language communication and information exchange, because as I start to learn more about ESP and the research we're doing, I think that it is occurring pre-language. And so doing pre-language type of testing will help us to learn more and more about how we get connected to each other and how we stay connected to each other.
I love that.
So it's a great crossover. Laura, you always have that bridge to the research and to the experience, and I appreciate that very much. Janet, wonderful to see you again. Joanne, it was great to meet you today. You guys
Thank
have
you.
just been
You
I mean, there's so many questions come in. I'm sorry I can't bring all the questions in. We could be here for days. Maybe we could do something similar again in the future. I'm sure there's a lot of other opportunities for people to learn more about you guys. I hope we have a chance here again.